Okay, guys, welcome to another live show of the Fan Stands with me, Mohsen, and we have another special guest. All of them are special, but this one is a very different one because for the first time we have someone from Japan, and he is an American-based person. So I want him to introduce himself. Hello, Dan.
Sorry. I thought the screen had froze. Thank you, Mohsen, for having me. My name is Dan Orlowitz. I'm a football journalist, sports writer at the Japan Times, which is Japan's largest English language newspaper. And I cover the J League and Japanese football and everything surrounding it.
Okay, so Dan, a lot of people might be wondering, we'll have viewers, we do have a few of them right now. They must be wondering how is an American person, and why is he covering Japanese football? So can you tell a bit brief history about yourself? How did you end up in Japan, and why did you take up Japanese football?
I was interested in my university years. I was interested in the pop culture, in animation, music, video games, all that sort of stuff. And I did my junior year of university here in Tokyo. Loved it. Went back to the U.S., graduated, and came back here for language school. And my first year of language school, I think I saw an advertisement for a J League game, and I thought, oh, this will be interesting. I've never been to a club football game before, which is true. I had never, and I went, and I went to it was FC Tokyo against Kashima Antlers in May.
Continue. Sorry.
Oh,
no, I was just continue.
It was May 2007, and I fell in love with it, and started going to more games and blogging about it, and that turned into a career. And I worked at goal.com and a few other sites, and now at the newspaper.
Okay, and how was the experience of your very first match? Did you ever attend a game in back in the States?
Not in the States. I had, during my year abroad here, I actually went to a national team game. It was a World Cup qualifier against, I think it was Bahrain, in 2005. And I think it was 1-0. It was either an own goal or like one of those sort of iffy goals. And players like Alex Dos Santos and Ogasawara and that whole generation, and it was just such an amazing atmosphere at Saitama Stadium, and we had a blast. And the J League experience was amazing. It's coming from the U.S. sporting background where we don't have that sort of active support culture. You don't have flags, you don't have songs, you don't have chants, except in like college sports. So experiencing that at the time was just such a different thing, and it was very easy to fall in love with and very easy to get into. Tickets are affordable. It's easy to travel to away games because Tokyo is very close to a lot of the nearby cities that also have J League clubs. So if you live in Tokyo, it's not hard to go to Yokohama or Kawasaki or Omiya or Urawa. And it's just such an accessible league in terms of being able to go to different stadiums and all of the match day atmospheres being so welcome and inviting. And that's one of the more unique aspects of the J League, is that anyone can go to a game, and you can go with your family, with your girlfriend, your wife, your parents, your grandparents, your kids. And I know this because you see it all the time. And it's such an incredible atmosphere on and off the pitch, and it's just really enjoyable. And for me, it was the culture that really made it appealing.
Okay, well, that's very nice to hear. So, you've been in the country for more than a decade now, right, Dan?
Yeah,
And
almost 14 years.
14 years. That's amazing. So, Dan, how has the sport grown in Japan, about the popularity? Obviously, I've never been to Japan, but I've heard and read from different articles that there was a time, or maybe there still is. You can confirm that baseball was one of the most popular games, and even in schools, the kids prefer to play baseball rather than football. So, well, what is the situation there right now? If you talk about schools and amongst the youth.
Well, baseball is still number one for team sports, but football is a strong number two, and didn't used to be like that, especially in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But once the J League opened, was formed in 1992, and the first season was in 93, you started to generate, an actual fandom for football. And now, 27 years later, obviously, right now with the coronavirus situation, we aren't getting many fans in the stadiums. But last year was the J League's highest attendance in history. It's expanded to 56 professional clubs across 3 divisions. When we started with 10 in just the top flight in 1993, and more boys more school kids want to play football than baseball when they grow up. And football has become, it is a part of the sporting landscape here, and the national teams are probably the most popular national teams in the country, even more so than baseball. The men's team is, of course, very popular, especially when they participate in the World Cup and the Asian Cup. And the women's team are former world champions. And I think that there is a challenge domestically, just because there's a lot of football fans. Then the question is, are you a domestic football fan, or do you like European and international football? And especially with the national team, the challenge is that all of our biggest national team stars play overseas. So the J League is working to sort of create new audiences and come up with ways to develop more good young players, since all the really good players are going overseas. And we're seeing a much different way of how the sport is marketed. And that's really changed over the last 4 or 5 years with DAZN, who's the current J League broadcaster. And the clubs have taken the money that's come from that deal and put a lot of effort into it. And I know that's a very long answer to the question,
No
but
problem.
it's, professional football has only been in Japan for 27 years now. But compared to Europe, we're not at the level of England or Italy or Spain, but we're catching up pretty quickly.
Okay. So, I like to confirm from that. You talked about the men's national team. Was 2002 World Cup being hosted by Japan and the national team doing well? I think they did get out of the group stage to reach the round of 16. Was that a pivot in, kickstarting the popularity of the sport in the country?
Yeah, the 2002 World Cup was important, not just because Japan did well, but also because when you're hosting a World Cup, suddenly the whole country is close to it, and they see all of these world-class players and teams in person or on TV, when they'd never been able to do that before, because obviously if you want to watch European football, you have to stay up very late. Champions League games here kick off at about 4:30 in the morning. So that was important because you do get to witness that talent firsthand, but also because of the number of football stadiums that were built for the World Cup. Saitama Stadium, which is still the home of the national team, and they use it for all the World Cup qualifiers today. Noavir Stadium in Kobe, Denka Swan Stadium in Niigata. Now it's the Showa. I forget what they call what it's called in Oita, but it was the Oita Dome. That is sort of the official name. And whereas Japan used to have mostly athletic stadiums, so these big stadiums with big tracks, and it wasn't really the atmosphere wasn't really there. All of a sudden now you have football stadiums where there's nothing dividing the fans and the pitch. I mean, they're more or less, and you have these amazing atmospheres, and that's allowed the fan culture in the J League to grow. So that's one of the biggest legacies of the 2002 World Cup, is all of these venues that are still being used today and still getting filled.
But that is nice. One of my favorite stadiums is Sapporo Dome in Hokkaido. It can change into a baseball stadium as well as a football one, right?
That it's a very cool stadium, and actually from 2023, the Hokkaido Nippon Ham Fighters, the baseball team, they're actually building a new stadium. So I believe that the Sapporo Dome is going to be used exclusively by Consadole Sapporo from then on, which will be good because during the summer, obviously, baseball, it does take some time to switch between pitches. So they have to play some games outdoors at these sort of far off alternate grounds. And so now, they'll be able to make the Dome their home, and that'll be good for them as a team.
Okay, understandable. So, we've also talked about the J League. So, can you tell us a bit about the J League? How many leagues, divisions do you have? I've heard about the J League, J1, J2. Who are the best and strongest teams to watch, and how does a neutral person like you and me choose a club? I mean, the broadcasting, I think we've discussed this offline, that it's not broadcasted vastly in a lot of countries. I think the UK, while I was studying there, they did sign a contract that BT Sports or someone will show the games. But how can one develop an affiliation with the club? I mean, for European clubs, I don't know, it happens naturally, or there are some players who play there, but Japan is different. It's unfortunately not as popular like the top 5 European leagues. So how can one select a team, and which teams are the ones that you would definitely recommend people to give a look and watch?
I think that just like in Europe, you don't choose a J League team. A J League teams can still choose you. You do just have to work a little harder to try to learn more about the clubs and what they represent and their playing style. The league is being broadcast in a number of countries this year, but one thing that's been improved a lot this year is the YouTube channel for international viewers, which has a lot of they have the match highlights, and they have a lot of archive content and a lot of cool historical stuff that you can use to learn more about the league and some of its more famous players. So the league itself is divided into 3 divisions. There's the J1, the J2, and the J3. There is promotion and relegation between the 3, and it's a combination of sort of your straight up and down. There are playoffs for the last spot between the J1 and the J2, and to go up, there is a licensing system. So for a J3 team to go to the J2, they need a J2 or a J1 license. For them to go to the J1, they need a J1 license. And the licensing system, I mean, this is maybe getting a bit too complex, but the licensing system basically encourages clubs to really be complete in how they're organized and how they're set up. It's not like the Premier League, for example, where clubs in the championship will spend a ton of money to try to get into the Premier League and then figure out the rest later. Nobody is spending a lot of money or going into debts. The licenses require everything from how the academy is set up and making sure that they have the right training facilities, practice pitches, clubhouses, the stadiums have the right number of seats, lighting for night games. They cover everything. And the J3 really, I mean, the J3 is only 6 years old. The J3 launched in 2014, and below the J3 is the JFL, the Japan Football League, which is the national amateur league. And you can get promotion from the JFL to the J3 by having the license, and then you have to finish in the top four. And that's not easy at all, because there's a lot of very strong amateur clubs in the JFL that don't want to be promoted. They want to stay as amateur company clubs. So to get past them is a big challenge. To get into sort of who the strong teams are, there are historically strong teams. Kawasaki, Frontale have always been strong. For example, they were champions in 2018 and 2019. Yokohama F. Marinos had a very good Frontale won in 2017 and 2018. Marinos won in 2019. And both playing this very attractive attacking style of football. Kashima Antlers, of course, are the most decorated team in the league, and they've been very strong throughout the league's history. Urawa Reds have had strong patches, and they've had weak patches, and they're currently in a weak patch. And then there's a ton more teams beside that. And I find that people choose their clubs, or I should say non-Japanese fans choose their J-League clubs for very different reasons. And that can be because their European club had a Japanese player and they want to support, they're interested in that club. So Dortmund fans like Shinji Kagawa, so they follow Cerezo Osaka. Or Inter fans know Yuto Nagatomo, and then they follow FC Tokyo because of that. Or you'll have situations where they live in a sister city. So, they'll learn about certain prefectures and certain cities through that. A lot of people who, honestly, I say that the best way to discover a J-League team is to come to Japan and to go to a game. And it really doesn't matter which game you go to. I will recommend certain stadiums and certain teams over others. But really, that's the cool thing about the J-League, is that any game you go to, you're going to have a fun time as a neutral. And you'll probably fall in love with whoever you watch.
Okay, so that is really interesting. I'll just spill the word out there. I haven't been to Japan and haven't been to the stadiums, obviously, but a few teams I've seen probably in the Asian Champions League, and I think they're very good. I like Kashima Antlers and Urawa at times. I think they're very good teams, especially with the way they play. And I remember Urawa Reds. I think most of them have foreign coaches. Is that true, Dan?
Antlers for a long time had Brazilian coaches. Right now, I don't think he's Brazilian. I think he's Uruguayan. I could be I don't think that they have. Let's see. It's a Zago, and he is Brazilian. But yeah, Antlers have always had very close ties with Brazil since back when they had Zico, of course, who's one of the most famous J-Leaguers in history, and he is still with the club. He is now their technical director, and of course he
sorry. Continue. I'm sorry.
And he managed Japan, of course, for the 2006 World Cup. So he's got very strong feelings about Japan. Urawa Reds have had, they had a number of coaches in their heyday. I think they got the farthest with German coaches. That's under. They won the league in 2005 and the Champions League in 2006 under German coaches. Currently, they have a Japanese coach, and most clubs have Japanese coaches these days, but you will find some clubs. Massimo Ficadenti at Nagoya Grampus, Italian coach, who's performed decently over several years in the J League. A couple with FC Tokyo, some not so good years with Sagan Tosu, and with Nagoya Grampus, he sort of picked things up. You've got. You've had Spanish coaches in recent years, a number of them A couple English, English and French coaches. Arsene Wenger. He started Nagoya Grampus way back in the 90s. And nobody really thought that he was much of anything when he went to Arsenal. Then look what happened. The J League is very good at exporting talent, and that's even true of coaches.
So when we talk about talent, especially coming from the J League, the number has increased in recent times. And before I remember growing up, we used to see Japanese players mostly only being limited to playing in Germany and maybe other leagues, but not the big leagues. But we've seen in recent times a lot of them have moved to Spain. I can recall like Shibasaki and Inui are in Spain. Maybe a few more. They were some of them were in the Portuguese league, and especially in the Premier League. I mean, we've seen Yoshida, Minamino is latest one to move. Okazaki, who won the Premier League with Leicester, and Kagawa, yes, with Manchester United. So has that raised some hope amongst a youngster in Japan that if I become a pro football player, yes, I can make my career long way. I can even go to Europe because these are the players who've done it before, and they've created this high benchmark.
Or if you're talking 10 years ago, Europe was the dream. It was, if you're a good player, you would be able to go to the J League, become a star, play for the national team. But the next level, playing in Europe, was the dream. Now, if you're good enough, playing in Europe is the expectation. And now, of course, the dream is being able to be like Minamino and playing for playing for Liverpool, and winning the Premier League, and getting to play in the Champions League. Like that's the next step. And now we have so many players. Germany used to be sort of the easy destination for Japanese players, and there were as many as 13 or 14 in the Bundesliga at one point, just because there were a lot of expat communities in Germany. There's a lot of Japanese companies, and there's a lot of Japanese people who live there, and so it was easier for Japanese players to adjust because there would be interpreters, there would be Japanese restaurants, and of course they could hang out with other players and have that support system. Now you're seeing players go to Belgium, for example. There's a lot of players in the Belgian league. Portugal has been sort of an interesting destination for a lot of players like Shoya Nakajima, who's not at Porto right now, although I think he might end up somewhere else this season. You're starting to see more in the Premier League, in Spain to some extent. Italy, not so much. I guess Nagatomo was sort of really the only success. Keisuke Honda was there.
Nakata Hidetoshi.
Of course, that you are very right. Nakata was he was the trailblazer, but in like the last 10 years or so, really, like Morimoto never really got it done. Honda didn't really get it done. Tomiyasu was getting it done at Bologna. And I think that the next step is the Premier. The Premier League is probably the most difficult for Japanese players to break into because of the visa requirements.
Okay.
And that, of course, that depends on how good the players are, but also the FIFA, what Japan's FIFA ranking is at any time, and the World Cup certainly helped with that because I don't remember the numbers offhand, but it did boost Japan's ranking to the point where players needed fewer international appearances to be able to qualify. So that's what really helped Minamino be able to seal that deal.
Well, he displayed a very good performance against Liverpool, especially in the Champions League, because I saw that game live, and I do follow somewhat Japanese football, mostly through the internet, and I've seen a bit of him. He was definitely very good for the Austrian league, and I hope he does well because I mean he was very good against Arsenal right now. But Dan, do you think I don't want to sound controversial, but this is a fact. I don't remember if it was on the local media or somewhere abroad. If you talk about 2014 World Cup, someone criticized that the problem with the Japan team is that they're not physical enough, and the strikers aren't tall enough to head those crosses, especially when you're playing against African teams or European teams. I mean, you're an American yourself. You know how tall Americans can be, especially if you talk about Germans and Dutch nationals. I mean, they have really tall defenders. So is that one thing Japan needs to? I mean, I don't know what is the way. There's one way of they've done it before. They've naturalized a few South American players, mostly from Brazil. So is that one way of solving the problem, or they have to change the way they play?
I think that what you're starting to see more and more is that when Japanese players go to Europe, they're getting a lot better at the physical conditioning and getting bulked up and really putting on some muscle. Minamino's been like that at Liverpool. Of course, they have a world-class training center, and they have a regimen set up to help him. You look at like Hiroki Sakai at Marseille. He's built. You look at like Maya Yoshida is like the problem is that Japan doesn't really build players like that physically very often. Maya Yoshida, Marcus Tulio Tanaka, who of course is Brazilian or from Brazil with a lot of Japanese and Italian ancestry. Yuji Nakazawa, who was a beast. Like we don't have huge players, and there is always a back and forth between like does Japan as a national team, does Japan play the Japanese way, and what is the Japanese way? Because for most of the national team sort of recent era, it's been foreign coaches who have really been coming through every cycle with various results, not always good results. Zico, he didn't really have control of the locker room by the time the 2006 World Cup happened. Trissier, he worked miracles in 2002. Alberto Zaccaroni, he won the Asian Cup in 2011, and that squad, those were his boys, and he stuck with them to 2014, possibly to his detriment. And then the 2018 cycle was a bit crazy. We had Aguirre, who was fired right after the 2015 Asian Cup. Then Vahid Halilhodžić, who got us qualified for Russia, and then they fired him 3 months before the tournament. And now we're back to Hajime Moriyasu, who did very well as a J-League manager, but the question is, can he be, is he a world-class national team manager? Is he a world-class national team head coach? And the answer is probably not.
Okay.
But it is we're in this such a transitional generation, and I think that what exemplifies that is that in 1998, when Japan went to its first World Cup, every player played in the J-League. Just about every player played in the J-League. In next month, in October, they're talking about having friendlies in Europe with an entirely Europe-based squad. So they're going to call up the entire squad from players who are already there and no J-League players. So the fact that Japan in about 20 years has gone from, all J-League to all Europe tells you a lot about how the players have improved, but it also means that these players are used to playing the European style football at their clubs. And then the question is, what are they bringing to the table now? And does the Japanese style have to change as a result?
So you've mentioned about the European style, the Japanese style. did the media or the local press, this people love to find criticism from somewhere. Did they ever raise an eyebrow that we're ignoring the local Japanese talent and we're focusing more just because a player plays in Europe? That doesn't mean he's a very good player. I hope you get my point. I mean, just because a player plays in Europe, that doesn't automatically always means that there's a J League talent. He's better than a J League talent. Maybe that J League talent needs to be seen on the world stage to, go to get a jump to Europe.
We have that debate all the time among us J League writers, bloggers, fans. Like, I mean, this is who the coaching staff of the national team is paying attention to in any given week is something that's really debated and discussed every time there's a call up. And there is that question of did Keisuke Honda deserve to be called up every single time, even when he was clearly declining as a player? It's tough. I think that you do need balance. You do need the other things, just sort of from a non-tactical point of view, is that without players who are playing in the J League every weekend, it does make it harder for the national team to be popular and to be in the public consciousness. In 2002, 2006, 2010, you were still seeing national team players in the J League every weekend. I remember in 2010, I saw the last J League game before the World Cup, or the last round, and it was FC Tokyo against Shimizu S-Pulse. And who was in that game? Yuto Nagatomo and Shinji Okazaki. And that was the last time either of them played in the J League. That summer, they were off to Europe. So it's tough. And I think that we've seen a lot of players go to Europe, try to prove themselves, doesn't work out, and they come back to the J League. And that's good. Well, it's sort of good. It's not great, because if a player goes to Europe, you want to see them play in Europe. But it is that mentality. I think that whenever a player leaves for Europe, they always give their farewell speech, and this is something I've written about a lot. And they always say, "Well, I want to go there and become stronger, and one day I'll come back, and you'll see how strong I've become, how good a player I've become." But by saying that, we always think like, well, aren't you sort of leaving an opening? Like, you're saying like, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll always come back to you. And we don't want them to say that. We want them to say bye. We want them to say, I'm out of here. Nice knowing you. I'm going to go to Europe and kick some ass. And that's the mentality we want from Japanese players, for them to say, I'm not going to go to Europe and then come back in a decade. I'm going to go to Europe and conquer. Like, Hidetoshi Nakata, once he knew that he wasn't at that level anymore, he retired. He could have come back to the J League and been a god for another 3-4 seasons. But he didn't need to. He'd proven everything he could. And I think that's the mentality that we want to see out of these younger players. And we're starting to see that, but it's going to be a process.
Yeah, when you said there's an opening, the name which came to my mind was, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Kiyotake.
Yes. He had so much potential at Sevilla, and then, he had some personal family issues, and that's fine. But like him, other player at Cerezo who I always forget, and now I'm going to stealthily Google it, Yoichiro Kakitani, who had an amazing 2013 season, ton of hype in 2014, went to the World Cup, went to Basel in Switzerland, and just was horrible. Didn't get any playing time and just was a total flop. Came back to Cerezo, and he's just been there ever since. And that's not what we want to see. That was disappointing. So it's like him, and like Hotaru Yamaguchi was another example of that. We recently had who am I thinking of? The Gamba player who went to Toulouse, which was, am I really going to forget this? Gen Shoji.
Mm-hmm.
He went to Toulouse and he did really well. Like if he'd stuck it out, he could have done okay. But he came back to the J League and he just decided. And I even talked to him before this season. He was talking about how players have to realize, like, you don't have to go to Europe.
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't just go to Europe because the team is offering it. You should like try to stick. If you're not good enough, like you should become good enough in the J League and then go to Europe. And so it's interesting how the player mentality on that has changed over the years.
That's good. So we have some questions from mostly Pakistani people. We've discussed some of them, but I don't want them to feel left out. This is a very close friend of mine. He's a very big. I won't reveal it right now. What is the answer to this? I know you have your own opinions and views, but we want to hear from you.
Greatest ever player. It's still Kazuyoshi Miura, King Kazu, who at 53 is still playing. Is he 53? I'm pretty sure he's still 53.
Yeah, he's 53.
Yeah. We laugh about him. It is sort of like a punchline, but like for him, the fact that he dropped out of high school, went to Brazil, did pretty well in Brazil as a young player, came back and was one of the leaders of the J League for its first, for those pivotal early seasons, helped Japan get to the World Cup. And he probably deserved better on the national team front because he actually never really played at a World Cup. Deserved better. Obviously Japan should have qualified for 94. And he's still playing, he's playing. Yokohama FC are in the J1. And eventually he's going to probably play in the J1 this season, and that's going to be incredible. But he did play in the Cup earlier this summer. And even today, the young players who see him, they look at him like he's a god. And he does still inspire, he inspired that whole generation of fans back in the day. And the fact that he's still going, he's someone that young players look up to, and players of every generation after him look up to him.
Dan, when I read about King Kazu, he kind of reminds me somewhat of a real life Captain Tsubasa going to Japan, trying to make it big.
And Captain Tsubasa that is sort of the answer. I think you want to talk about players who made a strong impact on Japanese football. Captain Tsubasa inspired a generation. Captain Tsubasa is why Japan has so much trouble creating a striker, because nobody wants to be the front man. Everyone wants to be that attacking mid. Everyone wants to be that sort of Shunsuke Endo, Shunsuke Nakamura, Yasuhito Endo. Like that is, the player that everyone wants to be, and that is because of Captain Tsubasa. And that series, it's still going on today. They're still cranking out new comics. They just came out with a new video game. We're actually, I think they're getting like a Pokemon Go style phone game next year, where they announced it. They announced it last year. I think it's still in development, and that'll be cool if it eventually comes out. Hopefully, we can all walk around by then. But,
definitely, hopefully.
It's still iconic, and not just iconic for Japanese football players, but across the world are players who have been influenced by Captain Tsubasa.
Okay, so funny you mentioned about Shunsuke. We have a question from another fan. Do you miss Nakamura's free kicks? Probably he's seen him.
We still get them. He's at Yokohama FC with King Kazu. He's still got it. It's Kazu, Shinsuke, and then Daisuke Matsui, who fans will know, obviously played several years in France and has been back in and he went around Europe for a bit. Now he's back in Japan, and like they're combined, they're like 130 something years old. Nakamoto's still
That
got
is
it.
that is amazing. That is amazing. The two players names spring into my mind, Dan. Uh, Ono, Shinji Ono, and
Mm-hmm.
I forgot Inamoto. I think
Yeah,
they're very talented. What went wrong? There's some. These are players I remember Inamoto coming in a Nike ad with Ronaldinho, and I was very young then. But I was just sold on skills. I mean, if you can just do an around the world skill, I used to think, oh wow, this guy's such a player. But Shinji Ono, I've seen somewhat some bits and pieces of him. I mean, these two players are very skillful, talented. So why doesn't it work out? Is it the patience, level of patience? I mean, sometimes you need to sit on the bench or even not be on the subs, and you need to realize that I have to wait for an opening, and I just need to train hard and learn as much as I can here. Even if I go back, I need to take something back with me to Japan, not just try and rush things. So what went wrong with these two
I don't
in
think that
Europe?
anything. I don't think that anything went wrong with Shinji Ono. I mean, he is still. His nickname is the Genius. Like he did really well with Feyenoord. He went back. He's been sort of an ambassador for the game. He spent a total of, I think, 5 or 6 seasons in Europe. Maybe actually closer to 6 or 7. He went down to Australia for a couple seasons, and he was very amazing there. And he's still, he's getting a game for FC VQ here now and there. I mean, he's probably close to retirement. He's had injury issues, but I think players like that stay on because they're sort of ambassadors for the game, and kids still look up to them, and they can still teach a thing or two to their younger teammates. Inamoto, I mean, he was never, he did sign for Arsenal technically, but that never quite worked out. And it happens. He still was a very good player for many years, and he walked so that Minamino could fly in a way, because it did take over time. There is the sort of hype issue with Japanese players, and I think the part of that is that fans, especially fans of European football, don't really get to see as much of Japanese players day to day. So what they see is highlights. They're seeing the best of the best, and that's from an era, Inamoto and Ono. You're talking about the late 90s, early 2000s, when there's no YouTube, there are no streaming sites. There's just no way to know how these players are until you get them out there. And now the game has changed so much that there's a bunch of 15-year-olds sitting in their basement in Spain or Portugal or France who know way more about like academy setups in the J League than I ever will, because it's so easy to look up that information, and you can go onto YouTube and you can see like high school games and under 18s and under 15s, and so now there's a more complete picture. So I think that there is, the hype does come from the fact that Asia is relatively unknown to fans, but it's also something special. So I think that over the years, just because of the number of Japanese players who have gone to Europe, the hype has gone down, because now European fans are more used to Japanese players and they know what to expect. And when the hype goes up for a player like Takefusa Kubo, for example, there's a reason for it. Of course he's hyped. Like, he's going to be one of the best players of his generation. So, I think there's a balance now.
Mhm. Okay, so you mentioned about Kubo and I think Hiroki Abe is second one. So I mean, in Pakistan, we have a big fan following of Real Madrid, Barcelona, the Premier League clubs, and Juventus, and somewhat some fans of the Milan-based clubs as well. So there's a lot of hype in Asia about these two players, and a lot of people say Kubo is better than Abe, or I mean, all things I've heard. It's a debate, but do you think they can get a chance at Real Madrid and make it big? I mean, this is as big as it gets. Real Madrid, Barcelona. I can't recall when they ever have an Asian player in their squad.
Abe, I'm not quite sure about. I think that then again, given the mess that Barcelona is right now, he can take his time. Kubo's the real deal. Uh, I was a photographer on the pitch for his first J3 game when he was still 15. And even as, he was a boy. Like, he looked like a kid wearing adult clothes. But you could see the skills. And then 3 years later, last year, I covered his last J1 game before he left for Spain. And he was a man. His voice was deeper. He had that confidence, that maturity. You could tell it from him when you're in the mix zone talking to him and you see him answering questions. You see him doing the press conferences in Spain, and he's just fluent in 2 languages, and he just has control. He's the real deal, and I think that he'll make it. I whether that's with Madrid or with another big team paying a lot of money to sign him, to be determined. But he's going to be an elite player at an elite club within the next 2 or 3 years.
Okay, that's good. So, Dan, do Japanese people sometimes feel that a European club has signed a player just for marketing reasons? I mean, Japan is a very big market to tap in and a very important one. A lot of times, people just say, "Oh, they've signed a player just for selling shirts in Asia." So, how true is that?
It used to, I think that's sort of the stereotype, because it used to be true, and it is sort. Miura, King Kazu, when he went to Genoa, that was because of Ken Wood, and that was a huge sponsorship thing. But Dortmund had no reason to sign Shinji Kagawa, and they got him for about 300,000 euros, and he had an amazing 2009 season in the J2, and he was doing well in the 2010 J1, but he's a nobody. He wasn't a star yet. And you look at how big he became and how good a player he is, and also his attitude, just the humbleness. And I think that's European managers like Japanese players are what they're looking for. They're looking for team players who aren't going to become divas in the locker room. They're not going to get overwhelmed by stuff. They're looking for reliability. And I think that these days, as I sort of talked about with the scouting and everything, they know who they're getting. And the commercial possibilities are always sort of there. But Jurgen Klopp isn't giving Minamino playing time because Liverpool wants to become famous in Japan. Liverpool don't need Minamino to become famous in Japan. They are already the most well-supported Premier League club in the country. So when a manager like Klopp plays a player like Minamino, it's because he sees that talent and he, game recognized game. So, I think that a lot of clubs are going for young Japanese players and hoping they may be sort of rolling the dice and hoping that they score, a surprise hit. But for the most part, I think that they know what they're getting, and they know that they're getting talent. Sometimes it needs more polish than other times. But generally, bad Japanese players aren't going to Europe. They're just, they're good players. Just a question of how much better they become once they get to the European League.
Well said, well said. And is Dortmund still famous in Japan? They're on high with Japanese players.
I'll tell you, if Jurgen Klopp came to like coach a J League club or like the national team, that would be wild. I think because of his relationship with Shinji Kagawa, that sort of cemented him among Japanese football fans as like the guy. He's sort of like the father, like he's like sort of like Shinji's father figure in a way. But we love him. He's a rock star. He's great.
Okay, that's nice. Another question from a fan, a random one this time. They lost to Belgium. Japan was doing so well. They would have faced Brazil in the quarterfinals, but how did people react to that? And I'm sure the media must have praised Japan after that World Cup, right?
Yeah, I think that it was such a wild World Cup. I mean, we didn't think we were going to do well at all. We expected 3 games and out. The coaching changed 3 months beforehand. It was a squad that was missing a number of players who we would have liked to see. Nakajima was left out, for example, and that was the really big omission. Honda wasn't really doing so well back then. Kagawa wasn't doing so well back then, and until that yellow card against Colombia, or that red card, excuse me, and that handball against Colombia, we were expecting them to get pasted. And it's a funny game because you actually have to play to see what happens. And the Belgian game, I remember because I was live blogging it for the Japan Times, and it was, I guess, kickoff was like 2 a.m, and you knew it was going to happen because it's sort of like, you think it's like, oh my, they get off to like a 2-0 or 2-1 lead, and it's like, oh my God, like, can they do it? And everyone hopes, yes, they can. You think, like, for a second, you think, maybe they can do it. They're 2 goals up. They're looking amazing. Everything seems to be clicking. They're going to do it. And then the first goal goes in. And it's like, okay, 20 minutes, they're gonna fuck this up. And they did. And a lot of that, I mean, Eiji Kawashima was Eiji Kawashima, and when Kawashima is on his good day, he's an amazing goalkeeper. But sometimes he does some stupid things. And that game was one of them. And, there's been 2 games like that I've seen with Japan. This game, the Japan-Belgium, and the 2013 Confederations Cup against Italy, that I think Japan lost 4-3. I think 4-3 was the final score. And at the end, I mean, it was just a wild game, and the defense was horrible, but all the goals were amazing. And you're just like, you know what? After that Italy game, it was like, you know what? They played well. They played way better than any of us expected. I was entertained. They did. The boys did well. That's all you can hope for. And it was sort of like the Belgian game. We were playing with house money at that point, and it just went how it went, and it was just like such a shock that it was like the ride was over, and it was at 4 a.m, and that was it. It was a very memorable game. It was the second or third Japan-Belgium game I saw. I actually went to cover the national team in Belgium in 2013, and that was cool to see them win in Brussels in a packed stadium. And it showed how close Japan could be to being world class. And if they had gotten that, I mean, I don't know if Japan necessarily deserved to get to the quarterfinals, but it would have been amazing if they had. And I would much, and I say that they didn't necessarily deserve it because it was such a weird squad, and it was so many players who had been around since the 2010 World Cup and since the 2011 Asian Cup. And I think that I would much rather see the next generation be the generation to get us to the quarterfinals and get us beyond that.
Well, let's hope they assemble a very good and an entertaining squad in for Qatar 2022. Let's hope this pandemic ends so we can see more of Japan. And we're almost about to wind up. Dan, thank you so much once again. You've given so much time to us. I hope you're not bored, right?
No, God, no. I can go on talking about this forever.
We can hopefully. There's some viewers watching. If you're ever coming to Pakistan or if I am ever coming to Japan, you're definitely the guy I'd love to meet. And so, if you're ever coming to Pakistan, do let me know. So, Dan, I'd like to ask one more thing as well. Vissel Kobe, I'm sorry the pronunciation again if it's wrong, but Iniesta, such a big name. I mean, one of the best midfielders we've seen in the world in the last decade or so. He's playing in Japan. So, what does that, has that created some impact in the local league? Because, mind you, with all due respect, I mean, even at 35, 36, he can easily dribble past those Japanese defenders. I mean, I've seen the highlights, but I haven't seen the actual game. So we want you to.
Vissel Kobe aren't that good. He's an amazing. The problem is that Iniesta, he's an amazing player, and he does still have it, but he's an amazing player when he's also with other amazing players. Even last year, when you would have Andres Iniesta, former World Cup champion, Lucas Podolski, former World Cup champion, David Villa, former World Cup champion. You can have 3 former World Cup champions on that pitch, and they're still finishing mid-table. Or I think last year they finished they finished 8th, but they were threatened by relegation for a good stretch of the season. And even in 2018, they finished mid-table in 10th place, and I think 4 points above the drop line. So Iniesta coming to Japan. I mean, this is Vissel Kobe, who are owned by Rakuten, which is Hiroshi Mikitani's company. He sort of wants them to become the Barcelona of Japan, which is why, Rakuten sponsor Barcelona's uniform. And he's trying to sort of emulate what a lot of J League clubs did in the early years, which is you bring in star players, and they bring in fans, and they bring in advertising, and they bring in attention, and then you just sort of ride them to league titles. It worked in 1993 because there weren't many good Japanese players, but the level has risen so significantly in these last 25, 26, 27 years that Iniesta isn't enough. Like, you would think that Iniesta would be the game changer for any team in the league. But, who won last year? Yokohama F. Marinos, who are part of City Football Group. And they didn't win with big stars. They won because they were able to use City's scouting network to make some really good signings. And they did, really smart, they have a lot of good tech in terms of analytics, and they were able to keep the players healthy and fit. And they had a very good squad that worked together and believed in everything their coach told them to do. And that's how they won the league. So, Vissel won the Emperor's Cup, but, at that point, you've spent close to 100 million euros on all of your European players to get one Emperor's Cup. Like, it's not really a good return on investment. And obviously we have a lot to say about Iniesta as a player and sort of how all of that stuff is set up. But as I talked about earlier, we're losing all of Japan's best players to Europe. And Iniesta has managed to bring attention to the J League and get us a lot of positive media coverage and bring fans to the league, new and old. So overall, his impact has been positive, but it's not everything. And Vissel, he started for them against Kawasaki on Wednesday in a League Cup game, and they got splattered. They lost 6-0.
Wow.
Yeah.
Barcelona players, former players aren't even having the best of times at the moment.
No, they really aren't. But it's But overall, it's
still good. I mean, it's still good. It does bring in a lot of attention. I mean, a lot of people will just flock to the stadium just to watch Iniesta play. I mean, if you talk in that regards.
Yeah, his first year and even every year since, wherever Vissel go, teams were selling 10, 15,000 more tickets than they would have the previous season against Vissel Kobe. So it wasn't just Vissel's home games that were selling out; it was their away games, and that does a lot. It helps the league. That's a lot of revenue for a lot of clubs. Teams here get anywhere from 20 to 30% of their income through ticket sales. So, it's not like the Premier League where everyone is, getting all these insane, TV contracts. So, it has been a positive impact, but you still got to win games, and you can't win, even if you have Andres Iniesta, if you've got Leo Osaki defending for you, it's not so easy.
It definitely isn't easy. Football is an easy game. Dan, thank you so much. There's still a lot of questions to ask, but time unfortunately doesn't permit for us to go on and on because I think we can go on and on. There's so much to talk about, but hopefully this isn't the first and the last time you're on the show. We hope you can take out time from a busy schedule and definitely join us again. And you provided us with so many insights and you busted so many myths we had about Japanese football.
Absolutely. No, thank you for having me on. It's my job, obviously, but it's, I've been passionate about the J League and about the sport here since before it became a job. And I think that I'm such, we're advocates for the J League and for Japanese football because it is such an amazing league, and we want people to learn about it because the more people from outside Japan who can learn about the league, the more it can grow, and hopefully, Pakistan and the rest of South Asia will start getting J League broadcasts soon. I know that the international office at the league is working very hard to come up with new deals and expand broadcast further. This has been a big year for them, even despite the COVID, and hopefully it just keeps growing.
Definitely, thank you so much. We hope someday it would be a miracle, but Pakistani players can be scouted by the J League. I know it's not in your hands, but if you have the opportunity, like they've done, I mean, they've set up a network in Thailand, and Thai players have done very well in Japan. Even I think a few Vietnamese players have come. We hope Pakistani players can make it to Japan. It's very difficult because of the cultural differences, language, but we do have talent, but like Japan, there's a sport called cricket, which is more popular, similar to baseball in South Asia, in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. But we hope talent can come, and we hope someday, J League clubs would visit us to play exhibition matches. Anything can happen. No one ever thought Japan football would be doing so well 30 years ago.
It's interesting. I think Japan actually played. They were in the under-20 cricket World Cup for the first time. I know. I mean, I know a little about cricket. I watched a T20 game when I was in Australia to cover the Asian Cup. My one day
Okay.
off, my one day off, and I spent it at the Australian Open and then at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, and that is a cool sport. It's fascinating, the culture, and I think that it's very possible that the J League could work with more South Asian countries one day. I think the uh, process that they've had with Southeast Asia, working with Thailand, with Indonesia, with Malaysia, with Singapore, with Vietnam, that's produced a lot of good stuff, and it's helped raise the level of football in Asia. And that's something that the J League and the JFA both believe in, which is that if the rising tide lifts all boats, and if the weaker countries in Asia become stronger, then that means that the stronger countries have to become even stronger and get to the next level. And so hopefully, I mean, we've seen that in Southeast Asia. Next, South Asia, I'd love to see more exchanges with the J League and Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and you never know, we might see each other in a World Cup qualifier one day. I'd
Hopefully,
love to visit.
we've played Japan, I think, in the very early stages of a qualifier. I don't know if it was the Olympics or what. And Honda once played against Pakistan when I think he was very young, wasn't a big name then. So we've lost badly, definitely expected. So Dan, thank you so much for coming in. Like I said, there's so much to talk about, but time doesn't permit us, unfortunately. I wish you all the best for all the future tasks ahead of you. And guys, do follow him on Twitter. I'll leave his details in the comments below. So if you want to learn about anything about Japanese football, Dan's a man. Dan, thank you so much. Take care, brother. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Mohsin. Have a good day, and take care. I hope everyone's enjoyed the show.
Yeah, you too, bro. Arigato and sayonara.
Have a good one.
Okay, bye.